has written in tears, let them to you paint an image. When Jabir comes to Karbala, which body does he first visit? Hussein, oh Abbas, Hussein, oh Abbas. Words that reside inside my soul, and each word wants two things different. How can I love intertwined flames, yet their own bodies lie separate? Between the Safa and Marwa, enchained in a painful moment, Hussein calls for him whilst Abbas cries for the women in the tents. Both voices break apart his mind. One lies left by yours is trampled, the other's voice never ending. Forgive me, master, I failed. Hussein, oh Abbas, Hussein, oh.
A couple of days after the Sunday afternoon picnic event, we went to al-Khu'i Foundation in New York. So we went to a big city, New York. You know, the population is quite densely populated, unlike New Jersey. Massive community. You know, tons of mosques, a lot, half a dozen maybe Shia mosques in New York. So it's quite a big city and a lot to work with. So we had this event in al-Khu'i Foundation, open mic poetry event. I think we had maybe 15 to 20 poets. Massive event with loads of different poets. But the nice thing about it is that it was very short, because a lot of these up-and-coming poets will come and read 5-10 minutes next poem. Even some were 2-3 minutes. It was that short. Alhamdulillah, like I said, Ali's been there last year. Last year was an afternoon program, so this year was an evening program. So slightly different demographics and slightly different audience as last time. But still, alhamdulillah, it was quite a mixed community. You'd have your Arabic Iranians, but then you'd have your Khawaja Pakistanis. Even myself, I think I met a few black, African and Caribbean brothers who had converted. So, when you come to these big cities, you get a lot of converts, mashallah. And these reverts would want to listen to poetry because it's something new to them, so they feel more like in touch with that poetry because they understand. And this again highlights the importance of Islamic poetry, especially in the West, for that touching stone for those reverts and converts to feel like they're at one with their Imam and feel like they're in touch with their Imams. So yeah, very strong and beneficial conference and event in New York.
So, Assalamu alaikum. My full name is Sarfaraz Hassan. I'm actually one of the few organizers of the Al-Qaim Al-Khu'i Youth Group here in New York at the Al-Khu'i Islamic Center. We've been here for about 2 years now, going strong. We're trying to, diversify the types of events that we have. So, alhamdulillah, tonight we had a great event, great poetry event with many of our local speakers writing their own poetry, delivering their own works, personal works that they worked on, and presenting it to the public so that we can all be inspired by it. And alhamdulillah, we also had Brother Nuri Sardar, we had Brother Ali Fadhil, deliver some great pieces of work, some pieces of poetry, and great delivery of Brother Ali Fadhil. I actually heard of him first in the Ummah Center, which was a few weeks ago in Michigan, and I thought his delivery was amazing. The way he presented himself, the way he presented the poetry, people could really connect with it. Being in New York, being in America, the poetry that we're used to, it's not as embellished, as ebullient in the same way that Nuri Sardar and Ali Fadhil were able to present it. So I'm very grateful that we were able to have them to read for us here tonight, and inshallah, we could have them read for us again in the future too. It's actually one of the most powerful expressions that we have, with our language. So it might not be the most powerful way, but it's definitely a way for us to express ourselves and connect with one another. with words that we might not be able to connect in any other way. So if we can write poetry and just write down our emotions on paper and then share it with everybody else, other people can be able to relate to it and say, hey, you know what, I feel that in my heart as well. Let me go meet this brother, and then in that way we can expand our connections throughout the community, and in the same way inspire other people to express themselves in the same way too. So this is actually one of the main goals of our youth group to have events that are in English, because we have, at least in my experience, we have plenty of programs in Arabic, in Farsi, and in Urdu available for us. And unfortunately, the new generation growing up, they're connected to those languages, but not in the same way that they're connected to English, because this is America. So obviously, we're going to be the most fluent in English. English is going to be the language that we're most connected to.
I were near him, next to his pure grave. If I had this moment with me, as we all celebrate, I ask you by my fate, Karbala for me, wait and I'll wait for you. Don't ever deny me, don't ever forget me, and don't ever keep me from visiting you.
False hope says I need her as comfort soothes a fragile heart, yet she cradled me, a stranger, soothed my heart's unattended wounds, provides its questions an answer. Now I walk familiar circles saying her name, take me back.
So at this stage of the tour, where our base was in New Jersey, in the Siena residence. So what we'd do is, from New Jersey, we would go to different centers. In New Jersey, one of the centers that we visited was in New York, and it was the same place we went to last year, and it was al-Khu'i Center. The majlis was predominantly dominated by reciters and poets. It was an open mic program where the majority of the program was poets and reciters reciting about Sha'ban time, Imam Hussein Abbas and Imam Zain al-Abidin. From my point of view, it was fascinating to see the different styles of recitation and different styles of poetry delivery, because I recite in a certain way, although I try to expand the different methods and styles in which I recite. But it was fascinating to see up-and-coming reciters and how they would associate their culture in which they've grown up with recitations.
Preparing for the fight, prepared to give his life, a tragedy that shines, they wouldn't hear his plight. They just want to kill for money, to extinguish that light. But today it shines brighter than ever.
Prophet Muhammad did go to war. His sword was elite. The reaction to combine Allah and man, the catalyst, is elite. The direction you face to Allah, the Qibla, is elite. Who was born in the Kaaba? No one but elite. The verses in the Quran, the translation is elite.
Today I find around me eyes without sight, the lantern slain, his words fulfilled. Ibn Ziyad the ruler, the lizards in plight, my world constricting, father's footprints still.
Swept blood, out of longing for Hussein, the skies swept blood. In this waterfall of wounds, Hussein laughs, resurrected. Salawat.
It was nice to see the depth of poetry and the different styles of poetry on that day, because of course me and Brother Nouri, we've struck a good relationship, and I'm kind of used to one style or one method of poetry writing in which I recite. And I'm just used to it, and I like it. It's very comfortable for me. But it was nice to see a different variety of styles of poetry and poetry delivery. So it was very much a lesson for me to see. Another thing was to see how the youth express themselves through poetry. Do they use ready-made methods such as the Iraqi or whatever the predominant ones in in the field, or do they use their different styles? And I noticed that there were different styles as well as ready-made delivery methods in which they delivered their poetry, which was quite fascinating. In terms of the recitations, with America, it's especially difficult to start to implement the clapping and the recitations and the participation. So it took a while for them to get used to the style of delivery. But once they did get used to it, it was quite an enjoyable experience because the mic was good. There was a good sense of vigor from the audience, and the participation was great. And I think everyone enjoyed themselves on that day.
To be honest, sometimes when you don't know the culture of the center that you're going to go to, sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's simple, and it could be very daunting as well. I mean, the difficult task is choosing what poem to recite to, because I have different styles of poem. I have poems obviously that have clapping involved and audience participation. I have poems which requires, you know, my voice, let's just say, or just for ear candy for them to listen to, something that they can enjoy. But the difficult thing is, without the clapping, I can't really intensify the situation. I can't really, you know, connect with the audience and really interact with them. And that's why I'm quite anxious to find out if there is clapping or not. If there is clapping, then great. I'll choose the poems that have incorporate clapping with them. If there is no clapping, then I have to try and get them to participate, but only using their voices, which is traditionally or culturally allowed for them.
Allentown we predominantly recited in a mosque, and the mosque had traditional basis and a traditional base to it. It was a Khaja mosque, and we were there to deliver workshops as well as recitations in honor of the Ahlul Bayt, and specifically the Sha'baniya period. So we made our way to the mosque, and we met some people outside to get a good feel of the vibes coming out from the community, and they're very much looking forward to the workshops and recitations because it's something new to them, it's something they have been introduced to. So for me it was quite a challenge, because every time I go to somewhere new, it's fascinating for me to find out how they react to clapping, how they react to recitations, how they react to a different style of poetry recitations in which they are used to. So in a way, it was like an introductory session for me to do the workshops, because then I could outline exactly how I'm going to deliver the poetry, in what formats, in what styles, rhythm, prose, rhyme, the different recitation styles, etc. The workshops was great. It was very interactive. I noticed that there was quite a lot of sisters and brothers who wanted to interact with me, and which was great because I could ask questions, and the crowd would often participate with answers, and very well thought of answers as well. It wasn't really like basic. It was quite in-depth answers. So I can tell that it was a very much educated community who knew their stuff, especially when it comes to recitation, because they are rich in tradition, rich in culture when it comes to recitations and poetry and lamentations, and very, very traditional. Because also what I noticed was there's a couple of shrine replicas in which is a very predominant feature within Khaja mosques and Pakistani mosques, so which was had a nice good backdrop towards it. Other than that, we finished the workshops, and then I went straight into the recitations after the first lecture and the poetry, and then the recitations came. Now, with the recitations, I think probably because it was towards the end of the day, maybe it wasn't advertised that well. The attendance was okay, but I could just tell that people were still tired because they went through an hour and a half of workshops, and then they went through about an hour and a half of lectures and poetry, and then my time was when I really wanted to get some energy out of them, but it was like the last remaining energy in their battery. So it's very difficult to get participation from them. So what I did was I had to be flexible and change the way I recited to make it more soothing, to make it more interesting to the ear rather than passionate and participatory style. So that was quite interesting because it was quite of a challenge, because obviously the nature of the Khaja mosque and the Khaja Khaja communities is that clapping is usually looked down upon or frowned upon, so they don't have clapping within their ceremonies, which was fine because I had to be flexible because I had to respect their culture. So I changed the style, and I mainly did recitations about the Ahlul Bayt.
So after that Thursday night program, we had an evening with some of the youths of Allentown, Pennsylvania, which was nice because on this kind of trip, it's very rare that we are able to have an evening of having just, discussions and a bit of a talk and a bit of a chat with the youth. So what we came to notice that is that the youth in that city in America are very similar to the youth of London. They have the same sort of issues, they have the same sort of difficulties. So it's nice because we were able to relate with them and relate to them in a lot of their difficulties. The following morning, alhamdulillah, we were able to take part in Salat al-Jum'ah at the local mosque. So we drove down to Pennsylvania, maybe another hour and a half drive, and jumped on a train. So we did the car journeys. We've done numerous flights at this point, and this is the first time getting on a train. So it was nice because we were able to experience all the little, modes of transport.
Yeah, we kind of got off at the wrong stop. We know where we are, but we stopped at the station before we're supposed to get off, and we're now cutting it fine to get to our last program. It's 6:30 now. The guy picking us up is about half an hour away. The program starts at 8. We need to get to a place where we can freshen up, get changed. It's not looking good at all. So we'll have to update you guys when the time comes, I guess.
Yeah, it's been years.
Arriving to Maryland, from last year's program, it was very much a success. Last year I actually finished my segment, and as I was going down there was a round of applause, and the host said, the crowd wants more. So it was more like, come back on stage, people want to hear more of it. So the community were looking forward to it. I was looking forward to Maryland because they definitely participate. The clapping was definitely there. And it was very much a program where we all look forward to.
The Adara program was our last program of this tour, and it was easily the most memorable for, you could say, some of the wrong reasons. The Adara Ja'fariya community of Maryland are again a predominantly Pakistani, Eco-Pak, East African Khawaja community also, and this is the same centre that has the massive replica shrine of Dharih al-Abbas alayhi salam, which was imported, and that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they've put that in the back of the mosque to create that spirituality and to create that togetherness and feeling of proximity within Karbala at that centre. So we've been to the centre before. We had an event with them last year. Initially, clapping was frowned upon, but it's become a norm now. So, alhamdulillah, clapping wasn't an issue. Mawalid was nice. Ali Fadhil had a very strong following and had a lot of fans there and a lot of, good friends.
Now, as I was going towards the program, I was a bit silent because I was a bit nervous because expectations are quite high now. You've delivered once. I was saying, speaking to myself, you've delivered once, now you have to deliver again, and you have to exceed expectations. So on the way there, I was quite silent, just reflecting what I can do, what I can focus on, what I can't focus on. And we were put in a small room, just so that we can gather our thoughts before we go on to recitations. Even there, I was quite silent, and I just had a weird feeling about the program. I wasn't that confident for some reason, and I just had this nagging thing at the back of my mind thinking, I can feel something in this program. I'm not really entirely sure what it was. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I can feel something was up with this program. I didn't know exactly what it was. So my turn came. I went up. Usually before I go up, I renew my intention and I go up and I say, Ali, just go out and enjoy it. Close my eyes, open it, I see the crowd, and I take in the energy from the crowd, and I just do my thing. The first 5 minutes, I was explaining the concept behind Higher, the track of Higher, and I recited it. So I recited it, dimmed the lights, put the instrumentals in the background, and I did a voiceover of Higher. At the end of that, people involuntarily just started clapping, and it's just a natural thing to do when someone finishes a performance, they start to clap. I started to hear a murmur, kind of like, there was a bit of a murmur of dissent going on.
It started off with a bit of a moan and a grumble in the back, and then it became more audible, and then it became a lot louder.
So I looked towards my left and I could see one of the uncles. He started to make some noise. He started to pick up on the issue of clapping and clapping this, clapping that. So I ignored it and I went to seek reassurances from the volunteer or from the host. I said, there's a bit of dissent there. Is that going to be a problem? He said, no, just carry on. We'll take care of the issue. Just carry on. So I carried on. Did my first recitations without clapping. Did my second recitations without clapping, just a poem. And then it was time for the clapping recitation and clapping poem and the clapping segment of the program. So here I am starting the program. I've started the program, I've started the clapping, everyone's participating, I'm reciting, and it's about 5 minutes into the clapping recitations and I can see that people are really enjoying it and I'm enjoying it and things are flowing kind of smoothly. I kind of put the whole dissent to the back of my mind. But then, about 5 minutes into my recitations, I think the guy had enough. And he stood up and he said, for the sanctity of this place, there will be no clapping, and we don't do clapping here. Clapping is haram, clapping is this, clapping is that.
It got to a stage where we had to stop the program. It became that bad, unfortunately, because it's very difficult for Ali to recite when you've got an elder in the background, shouting and asking to stop and saying, no, this is not acceptable, no clapping.
At this moment in time, I just stood still and I stayed quiet and I just waited for him to either finish or for him to be, for example, escorted out or for the next move. So I just stayed quiet. And at this moment in time, the program was literally on its head right now because someone clearly stood up and had a massive issue with the clapping. And I wasn't going to reply to him. I wasn't going to say, it's okay. I wasn't going to come and show my objection to his objection. So I left it. And he started speaking and shouting until slowly the brothers took him out of the hall. And then I told the hostess, and shall I carry on? The host said, yeah. So I made a bit of a light-hearted joke about it, and I said, okay, just in case before that whole thing happened, you weren't concentrating, now you are fully concentrating on me now and on the recitation. So we started again about 5 minutes into that recitation, and then I hear a massive noise at the back of the hall. Everyone was just looking at the man and everyone was just surprised and shocked at what happened because they thought they just took him out and everything would be fine. No, he actually broke free. This guy was sweating. This guy was, panting for breath. And he broke free of them and he just ran straight in the middle of the program and said, there was no clapping in this space, for the sanctity of the mosque. And that's when I just gave up.
It's a shame because not only did the program get, affected and ultimately ruined, and that buzz and that hype of the program, and it was very apparent and people were very much enjoying it, that got affected. But Ali was very disheartened and quite upset. And of course Ali doesn't want to upset anyone and he doesn't want to, rub anyone up the wrong way. So he straight away got down, apologized. So a lot of the elders from the community came and apologized to Ali and said it's absolutely fine what you're doing, you haven't done anything wrong. But certain people are set in their ways and their mentality is, clapping isn't acceptable, which is, in my opinion, comical.
We enjoy your stuff, but just ignore him, please.
No,
Okay?
totally.
Allah is looking better. Your niyat was nice, so don't worry about it.
I've just finished, so I'm just
problem.
Please.
going out for some breath. But
I appreciate it. Please, Jazakallah.
no problem, Haji, no problem. I mean no harm. Listen, I mean no harm.
We appreciate all you.
Apologize on all our behalf.
Yes.
Apologize. Please.
He is a little bit just one of the artists we have.
Some things are not in our control.
I know.
We did
I
try
appreciate it. I appreciate it. I just want some fresh air. That's all. That's all.
We
That's all.
apologize.
Just some fresh air. That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Haji.
No, but
I
thank you.
appreciate it.
You did a fantastic job. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
No problem, Haji. No problem. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your help. Thank you so much. No problem.
The guy actually had mental issues, and it's not the first time he's done that, and it probably wouldn't be the last time he's done that as well. So he did have a couple of mental issues, and you know, he's one of the elders of the community, and he's the kind of person. He's one of those uncles where you leave him to how he is. You don't get involved. You don't tell him you're wrong. You don't tell him off. You just leave him. You know, whatever he wants to do, he'll do, and then people will just explain his actions after. That's exactly what happened. Alhamdulillah, at the stage, I didn't reply back. I didn't retaliate, because if I did, I would have been in a very embarrassing and compromising position. But you know, I stayed calm, and things were sorted out.
We have to appreciate that he had, you know, extenuating circumstances that we have to take into account that made him act the way he does. So Ali was very upset when he had that, and the last thing he wanted to do was to upset anyone. He did even suggest actually going up to that old man and apologizing and shaking his hand, but the elders of the community thought that would be a good idea, and that might set him off and get him a lot more worked up, so we left it at that. In saying that, it got to about 11 o'clock on that Friday night, quite late. Everyone was really tired, but some of the brothers requested a post Majlis program, so to speak, at one of the local brothers' houses. So within a few phone calls and a few texts, the community got together. It was really actually quite brilliant. The community got together and sent a few texts about. 10-15 minutes later, we find ourselves in one of the brothers' houses.
So we went to this other house, and yeah, I recited as much as I want. People started to clap. People started to really, you know, have an enjoyable experience. And the main crux of this issue, the whole clapping issue and everything, is I just feel like the clapping adds another dimension to the enjoyable experience that the youth will have if they attend. Now, many questions have arisen regarding the fact that the youth have been a bit distant with the mosque. Now, the only way we can bring the youth back into the mosque is if they enjoy their experience in the mosque. That's if you have, for example, workshops, enjoyable topics, recitations, poetry, something that they can relate to. Now, for me, clapping is part and parcel of that enjoyable experience that they have. Now, if the youth leaves this mosque saying, you know, I enjoyed that, I don't mind coming in again just to listen to that recitation, just to have that enjoyable experience and participating within the recitations. Not only are they participating, but they are improving their relationship with the Ahlul Bayt, because they are clapping and they are participating, they are reciting with and along the poetry regarding the Ahlul Bayt. So they're listening to it, they're being inspired by it, and they're enjoying the message of the Ahlul Bayt rather than learning the message of the Ahlul Bayt. Because learning the message of the Ahlul Bayt is already been done by the lectures and the workshops and the poetry. But for the recitations, they're enjoying the message of the Ahlul Bayt. And that's the main message which I wanted to send out to people by implementing clapping within the recitations. So, although it was a bitter end, it was a bittersweet end because we got to have our recitations in a private house, and it was quite interesting to see because we kind of left the traditional anchors of the mosque or the traditional aspects of the community centers, and we went directly to a house in which you can see it was all youth. So the future ambassadors of the Ahlul Bayt were there present, enjoying the message of the Ahlul Bayt and hopefully taking it into their hearts to propagate this message in the future.
So alhamdulillah, that made up. They arranged that program to make up for, you know, the disruption in the first program. So the tour came to a quite dramatic end, came to a quite memorable bang at the end, but it was lovely end, and we have to thank the Maryland community heartfeltly for their efforts in arranging that program at really short notice. Within 20 minutes, everyone went to the same house and we continued the program. So all in all, I have to say a very successful tour. It was beautiful seeing all the different array of different communities and all the different array of different ethnicities and backgrounds all coming together in the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam and in the unity of togetherness in awaiting Sayyidina Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman and in spreading the message of Karbala.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Rida Rizvi. I'm in Maryland, and we just enjoyed a wonderful session of poetry in English with brothers Nuri Sardar and Mullah Ali Fadhil. It was absolutely enlightening and absolutely livening, and it was so refreshing to hear words of love of our Ahlul Bayt that we have always heard in Urdu, or we've heard in Arabic or Persian, and we hear it in English, which is my first language. My family comes from Pakistan, but I speak English first and foremost, and it is wonderful to have such a strong tradition spoken of in a language that I completely understand. So it was just great. I think it's something that the new generation will not just enjoy, but will thrive on, and I really look forward to seeing more.
So now that I've had some time to think over the whole 2.5 weeks of the US tour, as you may be able to call it, by visiting different centers across the east of America, I've had a chance to really reflect upon the pros and cons of this tour. Now, essentially, this tour was to implement traditional poetry recitations within the centers that we visited. Last year, what we did was, it was an introductory session into recitations and clapping and poetry recitations through a traditional method. This year it was more implementing this as well as giving the theory behind it. So the positives is that we were given an opportunity to explain ourselves in the form of workshops, and to explain the theory behind the practice of recitations. So in the different centers that we gave workshops, I was able to explain what recitations is. I was able to explain what poetry is. I was able to explain the different technicalities of recitations, how to recite, what to use, how to use your throat, how to use your voice box, how to breathe, how to take breathing lessons, how to do sound lessons, how to release the sounds from your mouth, what shapes you can use for your mouth. I was able to give the theory behind the different melodies, which is called in Arabic maqamat, the different types of melodies in which you can associate a poem with. So the definite positive was that I was able to give the theory behind the practice, because last year, like I said, last year was more just implementing, just dipping your toes into the water, as they say, to see the feel of recitations and how they are. This year it was more of an implementation. It was more, yes, recitations is definitely part and parcel of a program. Recitations is definitely part and parcel of the message of the Ahlul Bayt. And this year I was able to give the theory behind the practice.
When you're reciting, you don't recite to the people in front of you. When you're reciting to the back of the crowd. To the back of the crowd. You want to get this message all the way to the end of the crowd. That way you project your voice, you use your diaphragm right here, and you project that voice all the way to the end of the horn.
Commemorating the message of Islam is, for example, from an Ahlul Bayt point of view, I come to the mosque, it's the birth of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, I come and I commemorate the message of Imam Hussein.
The other positives was attending the Ummah convention, because that for me was a perfect opportunity to showcase the talent that I have, and to showcase the recitations, and to give it a brilliant platform to show the top quality recitations that people can give, and to show that recitations adds another dimension to a conference, to an event, to a seminar, to a program, to a majlis. Another one of those, another positive was the event in the park, and it was a very fun-filled atmosphere. It was the twist of this was it was literally in public. So these massive speakers were ringing the names of the Ahlul Bayt and the praise for the Ahlul Bayt in the middle of the park, and it was a very sunny day at that time. So it was a very good turnout, about 300-400 people. as well as non-Muslims just walking past, having a look at what's going on, and we looked like normal people. Because at the end of the day, to dispel the misconceptions about the Muslims, about them being very conservative and not going out, not mixing with everyone, no, we were literally in the middle of the park, middle of the non-Muslims. They were walking past. We were having a barbecue. We were having playing soccer, playing football. We were reciting poetry. So it was very normal. It was very good. It was a very feel-good atmosphere of the program. That was a definite positive.
The line of prophets had ended, the heavens had unattended. Muhammad, hey Muhammad, against even heavenly skies, the last prophets of God, the glistens of Muhammad.
For me, another positive was the fact that I wanted to improve year in, year out. Now last year it was very much recitation based. So I get up, I recite, people clap, people recite with me, they enjoy it and they go. With poetry and recitations, you're always looking to develop the method and the style of recitations, because you don't want to be constant and stagnated on one style of poetry, because people get bored of that. And because it's such a changing world, that you need to keep the youth enticed in poetry. And the only way I can keep them enticed is if I speak their language. Now that kind of atmosphere is an atmosphere in which they can relate to, and it definitely adds another dimension, because I can sit down and I can recite, but the only dimension is that you'll hear my voice and you'll hear the different variations of my voice. However, if I have some sort of instrumentals in the background, what I mean by instrumentals is humming, basically, different humming in the background, then that is one dimension and my voice is another dimension, so it becomes multi-dimensional recitation. And that was implemented this year in a couple of events that I recited in. We had instrumentals and I did voiceovers of them. So for me it was good to pick up my confidence, and it's something which I want to develop in the future, which hopefully I'm working on developing some sort of recitation based some sort of instrumental based recitations or performances in the future, as well as many other angles, many other ways in which we can keep the youth enticed in poetry for the Ahlul Bayt. That was something which is very important for me to implement within this tour, which I think, setting the foundations was great, because for some of the places that we recited in, they allowed it, and some of the places that we recited in didn't allow it. So the places that allowed it, we know that next year, if there is a tour, I can target those places to carry on with the progression of the recitations. Over the years, we understand that there are different segments to a program. We, in this day and age, we are used to, for example, when you attend a program, without even thinking there's going to be a lecture. Without even thinking there's going to be, for example, Quran recitations. But however, what we're trying to work on is trying to implement poetry as something which we don't even think about, and which will always be implemented within a program. Why? Because it adds another dimension to the program. It gives another feel. It's a different sound. It breaks up the program. So, and this is not just a 2014 issue. This is an issue which is very much rooted within Islamic tradition. And I mean Islamic tradition, not cultural tradition. I'm talking Islamic tradition. Why? Because the Prophets and the Ahlul Bayt would always recommend poetry, because lectures have their importance in terms of educating the masses on the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. But then, if we rely solely on lectures and books and articles, then we are feeding into the logic of the human being. We are feeding into the intellect of the human being. But we fail to realize that the human being has emotions. They have emotions in terms of being happy, in terms of being sad. The du'as clearly say, cry. When you feel bad for doing a sin, cry. That's an emotion. Crying is an emotion. Because when you cry, you feel that sense of remorse that you've done a sin, therefore getting closer to Allah through those tears. When it comes to the commemoration, when it comes to celebration, when it comes to the message of the Ahlul Bayt entirely, my main focus is how to get this youth, who unfortunately, this is a realistic scenario, would look at the mosque as a place where he comes and plays with his friends, socializes with his friends, not even batting an eyelid on terms of what the lecture is saying, in terms of what the poetry is saying. He doesn't really care. He's going because his friends are there and he wants to socialize. Now, how do I get this kid who's 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe 11, 12, 13, to entice him to enter the mosque? There must be something in the mosque for him to be enticed to come to. Lectures, no problem. Poetry and delivery, no problem. Art, workshops, no problem. But then there needs to be something that he enjoys, and that's where recitation comes in. Not only that, but deeper, we're looking at methods in which we entice the youth to come to the mosque. Why? Because the vision is that if we don't entice the youth to come to the mosque now, they will never be interested to come to the mosque later on. It's part and parcel. Death is a reality, and the elders will pass away. Now, if the elders have passed away, who's going to take over the mosques? We need the youth to take over the mosques. That's why we need to give the positions to the youth and say, listen, this is a position of responsibility, and there's no harm in giving that position of responsibility to the youth and guiding him along the way. When he makes mistakes, we say, you know what, pick it up, we'll focus, put your head up, and we'll focus again. So my main message is that recitations gives that opportunity for the youth to enter the mosque, because he sees on social media there's so much poetry around, there's so much recitations, there's so much singing, songs, whatever. But we have to give him that route towards the mosque through recitations, because that's in a way in which he or she can express themselves, express that feelings that they have for the Ahlul Bayt, express the emotions that they have for the Ahlul Bayt, and giving them that platform for them to be able to recite and to progress as a community, inshallah, in the future. Thank you very much for listening. You've been an excellent audience. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Ali Fadhil.
These are the words written in tears. Let them to you paint an image. When Jabir comes to Karbala, which body does he first visit? Hussein, oh Abbas, Hussein. Words that reside inside my soul, and each word wants two things different. How can I love intertwined flames, yet their own bodies lie separate? Between the Safa and Marwa, enchained in a painful moment, Hussein calls for him whilst Abbas cries for the women in the tents. Both voices break apart his mind. One lies left by yours is trampled, the other's voice never ending. Forgive me, master, I failed. Hussein, oh